Well, hello, and welcome back to Presentation DNA, the series where we're trying to unlock the genetic code, the fundamental principles of great presentation. And back in episode 5, you might remember this slide. And if you didn't see that episode, just click on the little card on the top right hand of your screen and you can go and catch up on it. But we sort of left things there saying there are various factors that can generate eye pull or make our slides more attractive, more able to hold people's attention for longer. We talked about layout and fonts and ratios and pictures, but the one I want to jump in and focus on right now is color. And just to make a little bit of a point, because I'm from the UK, I would just like to mention that colour does have a U before the R. So don't want to generate an international incident, but just like to point that out. So what do colours do? What is the job of colour in my slide design? And I think there's three things that we can talk about. One is contrast. So you'll notice that the word colours stands out from the sentence because it's a different colour. There's contrast between that blue and the white that the rest of the sentence is written in. And that is a cue or a clue for my eye that will tell my brain there's something significant about the word colours because it's different to the rest of the sentence. And that contrast is how I know that that's really what this slide is about. So having more than one colour gives us the option to contrast some elements of our slide with the rest of them, and that helps our eye decode what's more important, what's less important, or what's important right now. So contrast is one. Brand. This is a great way to subliminally introduce our branding into our presentations. Now, the one thing you should never do to introduce your brand into your presentation is to slap your logo on every single slide of your presentation. There's two reasons why that's a bad idea. One is you're taking up valuable real estate, and secondly, you're treating your audience like dummies. They know where you're from because you told them at the beginning, right? So you don't need to tell them every time you change slides, oh, and by the way, I still work for the same company that I worked for when I was showing you the last slide. So, and also, if you have the exact same object in the exact same place, it takes up space, but people will stop noticing it anyway because it's not changing at all and it just fades into the background. So it doesn't really achieve much. It is kind of annoying and you're taking space that you could put something more interesting in. So don't do that. Put your branding on your opening slide and maybe even your closing slide, but don't put it on all your other slides. That is pointless. Similarly, don't have these corporate slides. If you're in charge of the corporate slide deck, and sorry if you're not, but sometimes there'll be like a big swoosh across the top of the slide, and it just makes the layout look rubbish if you don't work in cahoots with it. So keep your corporate slide deck really, really plain and let all the interesting stuff be done by the person making the presentation. Anyway, if you're forced to use your corporate slide deck, do the best that you can. If you have any control over it, leave it wide open. Don't force people to work within a shape that may or may not suit their particular presentation. Anyway, thanks for listening. I feel better getting that off my chest. But branding, colours can help us subliminally brand, and make sure that you explore the full gamut of your corporate style guide. So every company has a primary corporate colour. But most large organizations will have a surprising number of colors in their palette, and you can get some really cool presentation designs just by exploring a little bit deeper into your corporate style guide. So make sure you're familiar with all the colors that you're allowed to play with. If you're not working for a corporate or you're the boss or whatever, then obviously you've got total freedom. But branding does matter, but we can do it with colors in a really nice way. And then the last thing that we can use colour for is to set a mood or a tone for our presentation. So if I was making a really high impact presentation, let's say it was about the impact of plastics in the ocean. It's a hot topic right now. I'd probably go for high contrast colors because I don't want you to feel too relaxed in my presentation. I want you to be on the edge of your seat thinking, oh my nerve, what must I do? What have I got to do about this? So I would want strong contrast colors. But if I was talking about taking personal responsibility for our own mental health, I definitely wouldn't be using shouty colours for that. I'd want to have them calming and peaceful and relaxing colours, because that would back up my central message, which is we all work better when we're coming from a place of peace. So the mood is part of your presentation, and our font choices, our colours, some of our imagery can all contribute to the mood, but the biggest contributor probably is the colours that you're choosing to use. So let's talk about colour palettes. And really a palette is just a deliberate assembly of colours for a purpose. So it's not just some random selection of colours that you found on Pinterest or on the web somewhere. This is a deliberate choice of colours, and I've just got 4 examples here. There are many, many more, and there's a vast science of colour. There are people better than me at explaining it to you, but if you go onto YouTube and just put in colour science for beginners or colour science for dummies or how to build a colour palette, there's some absolutely fascinating science behind why some colours work together and some don't. So I'm not going to go that deep. I'm just going to show you some examples here. So on this top one, at the extreme left, that's the starting colour. And as we go towards the right, those are the colours you get when you add increasing amounts of white to that original colour. So those are called tints when we get them by adding white. So that dark blue, that might be your corporate colour, but we can get shades of it just by adding white and deriving ourselves quite a healthy sized palette there. Next one down is full of earth tones. So if we were talking about gardening in arid climates, that would be quite a good colour palette to use, wouldn't it? So it's got some empathy with the subject material. Again, they're quite calm colours. They feel earthy and organic. They would be a great set of colours to use for that kind of presentation. If I was going to do a presentation on the joy of Mexican cooking, which is spicy, I would use this third palette down because it's got some really hot colours, but they're warm, they're attractive, they're not aggressive colours, but they've definitely got some fire to them, haven't they? So that would be a pretty good palette to use for that sort of presentation. The last one is a palette made from 2 primary colours. So the orange on the extreme left and the bluish purple or purpley blue at the extreme right are our 2 starting colours. And then we've made 4 more versions of each of those colours. And then we've got basically a 2-pronged colour palette. You can have a 3-pronged one as well if you want, but that's getting more complicated. But orange and blue, or teal and orange, as they use in a lot of Hollywood film colorization, just work really well, where you've got orangey highlights and purpley blue shadows. It just looks really good. So we could take a nod from Hollywood and come up with that last palette. So the object is to assemble a range of colors, and that's what I can use from time to time to get the contrast that I want, the highlighting that I want, the interest that I want, and just to make it look more interesting than just 2 colors. But speaking of that, we will talk about the most basic palette that you can get away with, which is a 2-color palette if you are careful with it. But just before we jump into that, let's look what happens when I change the background color. So we've been talking about the colors for our information and our content, but actually the color of the background of your slide makes a surprising difference. So if I just take away this transparent logo off this and just get back to the basic gray. So this is the color that I use for a lot of my presentations, and I'll explain why in just a second. But have a look at these colors, really focus on them with the gray background. And then while you're still looking at them, look what happens if I switch that gray for black. Just see how the colors really pop off the screen now, don't they? They've got a lot more vibrance into those colors. They're really vivid and the contrast is high. And I love this look, but it is pretty much in your face. but all colours look at their brightest and most vivid against a black background. So that might be something you might want to consider. If we go to the complete opposite end of the scale and make it white, do you see what happens there? We lose how vivid the colours are, but because we're getting so much white coming at us from the screen, it gives a very bright feel to the presentation. It knocks the colours back a little bit, but again, we've got quite high contrast, certainly at the mids and dark end of the scale. So I come back to this grey, which is hex code 494949 for those of you who are interested in that. But it's a halfway house, so it gives you quite a kick for your colours, but without being such a strong contrast as the black would be. And it's got some of the freshness of the white background, but grey is quite a warm colour, so it gives a warmer feel to my presentations. I like how much pop I get from the colours, and it doesn't make it too gloomy or too overwhelming. So it's more about taste than it is about science, but it is just worth becoming familiar with how colours behave depending on the colours that they're next to or in front of. So we talked about basic colour palettes, and the most basic colour palette is actually what we'd call a two-colour palette. Now, it's two colours on top of my background, so I've got the grey already, but a basic two-colour palette would have a normal colour, like I've used for all the text on this, this slide. It's not complete white. It's relatively low contrast, and contrast might be a problem if you go too far with this. But I like this slightly ivory white against the grey. It's calm, it's warm, it's attractive, I think. But then my second colour would be where I want to highlight something. I want to draw your attention to something. So I've got my main colour, my normal colour, and then I've got a contrast colour. And then there's the three-colour version where we keep the first two, but then we have a highlight colour, which I would use very, very sparingly. But sometimes you just need to really make something pop or change the mood or shock with something that you're about to bring on the screen. And it's important that they all work together with each other and that they all work together with the background. But that gives me just one more option where we've got normal contrast, and everybody's eyes will get into that language and realize that when I want to steer you deliberately, I'll use the blue. And when I'm giving you information, I'll use the white. But this version just gives me that option to just now and then say, hey, but, and then I can use my highlight color for that. So with three colors and a background color, you can go a very, very long way with making presentations. And that's for most people as sophisticated as you need to be. So I was showing you palettes on the few slides back there that had 10 colors in them, but you don't need to have 10 colors. And the thing is, if you're not really tuned in to the language and the science of color, if you have too many colors, you'll just end up picking them at a random, and that probably doesn't really help you that much. So I would say start off with your normal color and a contrast. And as you get more into the idea of using color as part of your presentation, maybe think about adding a third color for highlighting. And then just think about, do I want a white background or a mid-tone background or a really dark background or a black one? And then you're pretty much set. But let me just show you a few places that you can actually get colors from. So how to assemble your color palette, whether that's 2, 3, 10, 20 colors. There's plenty of places that you can just grab them from without actually having to do any work at all, really. So let me swap over onto my browser. And this is a site called coolers.co. It's not sponsored. I'm not in any kind of relationship with them. I've just used their site quite a lot to get selections of colors for myself. So it's COOLORS.co if you want to go and look it up. Or just go into your search bar and put color palette generator and you'll get loads of options coming up. The thing I like about this one is I can just keep hitting the space bar, and every time I hit the space bar, it will generate another set of colors. And if I whiz past and don't notice how good one of those sets of colors was, I can just go back. That one's quite an interesting one. I like that. It appeals to me. So it will keep generating sets of 5 colors for as long as you keep hitting the space bar. But if you find a color that you like, you can just padlock it and say, let's keep these 2. And then I hit the space bar again, and just the 3 that are not locked will keep changing. And it's just showing me colors that all do make sense with each other and allowing me to assemble them gradually. So I might pick this one here. Actually, might even pick that one just for speed. And then just this one will keep changing. I might even stick at that. And then I can export that color palette in various ways, or I can just copy the hex code here, this 6-digit code. So in most programs that use color and website design programs, you can go into hex mode, you just type in hash and then those 6 digits and you'll get the color that you're looking at on the screen. If you export it as a palette from up here, you can then get the RGB values or the hue, saturation and lightness values. So you can play with it in lots of ways. So that's a really simple way of getting colors. Let me also show you this, because I use the Adobe suite. You can go to Adobe Color or color.adobe.com. And again, this is not sponsored, but one of the ways that I can create a palette for myself is to extract a theme from an image. So if I select File and go to this folder here, this is a picture that I took in Delamere Forest quite a long time ago, actually. Probably tell me here what year I took that, but anyway, some years ago, 2016, 28th of December, I was in Delamere Forest late in the afternoon and I saw this incredible misty sunset. Took a picture of it. So let me take that picture, upload that, and Adobe Color will pull a palette from that picture for me. And then I can say, well, go for brighter colors or more muted colors or deeper colors or dark colors. I just like the colorful option. Now I can tell it also to say, well, don't take that color, take this one. So I got full adjustability on this. Again, I get my hex codes here, and I can also save that as a palette, and it will give me, I'd have to sign in to do it. Not going to sign in front of you, but then I can have the RGB values and all of that other stuff, and save that for future use, or I can save it as an ASE file, which will incorporate straight into Photoshop or Illustrator or Premiere or whatever. So that's one way of doing it. I can go to the color wheel, and that again works on banks of 5 colors. I can put in a hex code. So if I do 4E7EAO, that's Practicalize Blue. And then I've got different ways it can generate those colors. So here's my starting color. And this is analogous colors, where it takes them from an imaginary circle around the color wheel where the radius is pretty much the same for all of them. Or I can go monochromatic. That's basically different shades of my color. Or I can go for a triad. This is a really good one if you're just going to have a simple 3-color palette. So you take your central color that you've specified, and then you take the one to the right and the one to the left, and there's your simple triad color scheme. So you don't have the same, as far as I know, that you had in that coolers where you can keep regenerating the palette. But this will give you a good way of playing with colors that work together without you having to know all of the science. The other thing that you can do is go onto a website, and if you typed in some brand name that you know, and just type in your search bar your brand name and then color palette or corporate colors, it will give you the corporate colors of that brand, and you could start to use some of them. Or here's another web page. This is Faro and Ball. Again, I'm not sponsored by them in any way. But because they're a paint manufacturer, they spend a lot of time coming up with really attractive color combinations because they want you to buy their paint and try and replicate it. So because I'm on a Mac, I can do Control-click, and that will give me the option to save the image as. I'm going to save it into that same folder where I got my Delamere Forest picture. I'm going to go back here. I'm going to extract theme. And I'm going to replace the image and replace it with that screen grab of Faro and Ball. And now it's making a color palette for me from this photograph. And again, I have options. So you can see it's taken some of the dark gray here. It's taken this green here, the blue of the carpet, and the yellow and orange from the fire. But I can drag any of these and say, well, don't give me the yellow from the fire. Give me that more mustardy color from this bowl. Or I could try up here on the flowers. See, it's taking mostly greens, I guess, there. So I'll leave that back on the fire. But again, I can assemble myself a nice palette that's basically designed by experts who work for Faro and Ball or whichever website you go to. So these are all pretty easy ways of assembling a set of colors to use, and that gives you options knowing that they all work with each other. But then you can use color to infer your brand, draw the eye to certain elements on your slide, to let your brain know what's higher priority and what's lower priority, and to make your finished slide attractive so that people do actually want to look at it, which is the job it's got to do. It's supposed to back up what you're saying, and it's supposed to hold people's attention so that they're not staring out of the window or the carpet or the head of the person in front of them. That's what color can do for us. So hope you found that helpful. There's far, far more about color to be known, but again, do some research on YouTube. That will help you. If you found this helpful, please consider liking and subscribing. And you might also want to go to buymeacoffee.com/Mark Buchanan. And there you can just help support the channel and make it easier to keep producing these videos. So hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed being with you. Thanks for being with me. And we'll catch you on the next one.